America is known by Americans for always doing the right thing. However, throughout history, the good always came with the bad, but it was locked up and shoved into the deepest and darkest parts of the closet. Because with America's prosperity, there was always collateral, and nobody wanted to talk about it. With the expansion of America in places like Hawaii and the Philippines, America gained more resources and land, while the natives living in these places were entirely disenfranchised and exploited. Hawaiian people were exploited for their sandalwood and sugar, while the Philippines were a resource-rich territory because of their sugarcane, and the U.S. wanted it. The natives were exploited along with the Hawaiians with harsh labor and very low compensation. During the Progressive Era, when women were getting more rights than ever before, they were still oppressed. As they were fighting for the right to vote, they were thrown in jail and tortured. Women peacefully picketed but would be jailed for made-up crimes. When they were in jail, they would be force-fed. This period of time usually has a good light shown on it because women finally got the right to vote. But what they had to do to get it was unspeakable. World War I occurred because each country who wanted power was militarizing. Soldiers from each nation fought so their country could prove they had the most technologically advanced weapons. 38 million people died from World War I, from starvation, fighting, disease, and problems in trenches like trench foot. When the war ended, there was no clear positive outcome for anybody. 38 million people died. For what? So that a couple of world leaders could prove a point? 38 million lives gone. The Roaring Twenties. When you think of prosperity and parties, you think of the 1920s. But there was much more than met the eye during this time. Nativism was a major proponent. Palmer-Rays were rounding up anarchists and putting them in jail. There were intense opposition to minorities, and the quota system restricted the number of immigrants. The KKK was strong and more destructive than ever. Republican ascendancy was in power, and the U.S. got some of its worst leaders ever, which will lead to the Great Depression. The 1920s were really only good for the rich and for the white. The Great Depression was a time of complete and total national poverty. From this spawned the New Deal, an attempt to salvage the economy. One of President Hoover's most praised projects was the creation of the Hoover Dam. It is seen as revolutionary, and it quote-unquote saved so many people. The workforce hired was extremely exploited, however. They took the work anyway because of how desperate they were, and there was a line of people who would gladly take their place. 96 people died and hundreds more were injured. This and many other acts from President Hoover frustrated Americans. When the United States intervened in World War II, they were seen as the big heroes that came in and saved the day. However, they did not enter until December of 1941. The U.S. knew the horrors that were occurring just across the ocean with concentration camps and mass genocide, but chose not to help until the bombing of Pearl Harbor. They didn't enter the war to help the Jewish people who were being exterminated or the 60 million others murdered. No. They entered the war when something bad happened to them. They weren't heroes. The U.S. was just trying to save their own skin. The people hurt with each step forward needs to be talked about. People very rarely think of the 1920s as a hard time for minorities. They think of the parties and the music and the dancing. The same is for every piece of American history, all the way back to the Founding Fathers kicking out Native Americans from their own land. But things can change. Things need to change. And the first step in making that happen is to learn about it.